So Sicha is Shabbos Parsha Mishpatim. It's a Sicha from Shabbos Parsha Mishpatim that was also, like this year, two others. Mavarch Ma Chodesh ve'erev Rish Chodesh Adar Rishon Tavshin Mem Tes. It was both a Shabbos Mavarchim Adar and was also the day before Adar Rishon, the first Adar of Tavshin Mem Tes of 1989. In other words, Sunday was Rish Chodesh. So he says, you do a Pizgan Rabbein Azakin, it's known, the phrase, the axiom of the Alter Rebbe, that was given over and was made well known through the Frierdiker Rebbe, the leader of our generation, that one needs to live with the time. Whole famous story that the Alter Rebbe once came out of his room and he said, you got to live with the times. And that seemed to be a call and an idea of dealing with modernity, which didn't make any sense. And therefore, the Chassidim were very puzzled until the Mittler Rebbe came out and explained what does it mean, this idea of living with the times. So the Mittler Rebbe explained, to live with the Torah matters that are connected to this time, meaning what Torah matters are connected with this time, beginning from the Parsha of the week. This means to say, what does it mean living with the Parsha of the week? That the matters of the Torah, nasim chayav shel Yehudi, they become the life of a Yid. Chayenu ve'orech yameinu, our life and the length of our days. Ad l'chaim gashmi kipshutam, till they become the actual physical life, physical vitality, physical energy of every Yid becomes the Torah of that he's learning, the Parsha of the week. So then the Rebbe says, this is true for every Parsha, but this is actually hinted in our Parsha. Shleimer, we could say, concerning this, there's a hint in the Parsha of the week, which is Parsha Mishpatim. Liyoisa ha-Parsha ha-Yudches ma'askolos ha-Torah. Parsha Mishpatim is the 18th Parsha from the beginning of the Torah. Shesimona Chai. The gematria of Yudches is the word Chai, meaning alive. L'ram is to hint us. Sheyehudi tzarech lichyois im ve'ela Mishpatim. A Yid needs to live, be alive with, and these are the mishpatim, these are the rules, these are the statutes, these are the laws. Ve'ela moisef al rishonim. The Chazal explain, Rashi brings down, why does it say ve'ela mishpatim? Ve'ela means and these. What's and these? What's it coming to tell you? And these are the laws. You should say these are the laws. Ve'ela moisef al rishonim. The word, the vav of ve'ela, the and, comes to add to the first ones. Ma rishonim is Sinai, just like the ones in Parshas Yisrei. The Aseres HaDibros, those were given on Har Sinai. Af elu misinai, also these were given on Har Sinai. You shouldn't think that the laws and the rules in Parsha Mishpatim, which are logical and rational laws, were somehow given from a human source, chas v'shalom. But ve'ela Mishpatim comes to tell you that just like the Aseres HaDibros were given on Har Sinai, so too the laws given in Parsha Mishpatim are also given on Har Sinai. Getting back to the idea of the Chayus, that Parsha Mishpatim is the 18th Parsha in the Torah, indicating the idea of life. So this idea of life, the Rebbe connects with Sinai. Hainum shetzrichim lichyois ima inyan de Sinai. A Yid needs to live with the idea of Har Sinai, meaning Torah. So now the Rebbe says, we know that we need to live with every Parsha of the Torah. Why did Hashem make it come out that the 18th Parsha, meaning the Chai of the Torah, is Parsha Mishpatim? So the Rebbe says, the last paragraph in the first column, Vatam she'inyan zeh Chai, nirmaz v'Parsha Mishpatim davke. The reason why this idea of being alive is hinted specifically in Parsha Mishpatim, v'loi v'Parshas Yisroi, the Parsha the Matan Torah Guf, not in Parsha Yisrael, which is the Parsha of the giving of the Torah itself. As opposed to Parsha Mishpatim, there's a reason someone might come to say that it might not be from Har Sinai. It might have been a human invention, a human creation, and the Torah has to hint to you and tell you, no, these are also from Har Sinai. If you want to tell me that the idea of Sinai Torah is something we have to live with, so then Parshas Yisro should have been the 18th Parsha, indicating the idea of Chai. The Rebbe says the reason why specifically Parsha Mishpatim, top of the second column, ki Parshas Yisro medubar beikar oides netzinas ha'Torah al ma'il. In Parshas Yisro, it speaks primarily about the giving of the Torah from above. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, that Hashem descended in Har Sinai, and like the Medrash elaborates upon this, ha'al yonim yedul tachtoinim, those above will descend to below. And primarily in Parsha Mishpatim, it's speaking about the Yidden receiving the Torah. What's going on down here below? Moshe Amar Alei Hashem, and to Moshe he said, "Go up to Hashem, Tachtoinim Yalel Yoinim." That the other half of the equation, which is that those down here below should go up to above, because that's the parsha where it's recorded that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, "Come up to Hashem." So again, the Aseres Hadibros Parshas Yisro, it says Hashem descended. So that's talking about the above coming down below. Parshas Mishpatim, it speaks about the ascent of Moshe, meaning the elevation and the receiving of the Torah through the Yidden. That's the idea of those below going up above. Torah Sinai, Torah, which is exemplified by Sinai, it permeates also in human intellect. That's the idea of Mishpatim specifically. We know of the different categories of mitzvahs. Those mitzvahs that fall into the category known as Mishpatim are the logical, rational mitzvahs, meaning that Torah permeates even human intellect. The super rational mitzvahs remain above human intellect. The rational mitzvahs, the logical mitzvahs, those are mitzvahs that are permeating the person. In such a manner, like it's explained on the beginning of our parsha. What's it mean, tasim lifneim? You shall place it before them, meaning you should arrange it for them, set it up for them that should be easy for them to understand. Lahavinam taime adavar, to make them understand the reasons of the matter. Upirushay, and explanations of the matter. Kishulchan ha'aruch, like a set table. Umuchan, and it's prepared lechayil, to eat lifnei adam, before the person. This is the reason why the Shulchan Aruch is called Shulchan Aruch, because it's a set table, it's all nicely arranged. That is what Parsha Mishpatim is about. It is, we are receiving the Torah. We are in being imbued with the Torah. We are taking it in. The union of the person's in. I'm sorry, skip the line. To such a degree, through the level of the rational laws of the Torah, the union of human intellect with Torah, also the super rational laws become in a level of being rational, meaning that also they permeate the human intellect. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe speaks about it at length in a different Sicha, but the example he brings of it is that in our Parsha, in Parsha Mishpatim, there are mitzvahs that are part of the realm of chukim. For example, not cooking a kid in its mother's milk, that's kashrus. Kashrus halachas is something that's super rational. So the question is, what's it doing in Parsha Mishpatim? Seemingly Mishpatim is about logical laws. So the reason it's in Parsha Mishpatim is because of this concept of permeating the person, of having it become part of the world of the person, that even that which is super rational should be, it doesn't necessarily become intellectually rational, but I become totally joined even with the super rational part of the Torah. This lesson that one needs to live with the Torah, that's hinted specifically in the 18th Torah portion, is not in Parshas Yisro, but he be Parsha Mishpatim Dafke, specifically in Parsha Mishpatim. How come? Like we asked before, why not in Parshas Yisro? Ki Sharas Lichies in my Torah, the capability to live with the Torah. That what does it mean living with the Torah? The Torah permeates the person's entire being. Until he lives with Torah. The Torah becomes his vitality. It's through these mishpatim that you will place before them, meaning they are the rational laws. They are placed before them, like we said, like you arrange a table, you explain it very well. When the Torah permeates also the intellect of the person, till it becomes like a set table, and ready to eat lifnei adam for the person. Similar to literally eating. What happens when a person eats? Something that was outside of him, something that was separate from him, now becomes ingested. That physically now this outer thing, this food, the bread, the meat, whatever it is, the vegetables, is now becoming part of his blood and part of his flesh, that through that the person lives. So this message of life has to do specifically with the idea of living with the Torah, is something that permeates this part of us, this part of the part of Torah that teaches us about inculcating the Torah and like consuming the Torah like a set table. And then the Rebbe contrasts it with Yom Tovim, so this becomes even more geschmack. Parshas Yisro here, Parsha Yazayin. If Parsha Mishpatim is the 18th Parsha, so therefore the Parsha before it, Parshas Yisro, is the 17th Parsha, which is B'gematria Toiv, which is the numerical equivalent of good. And like the Chazal say, Ein Toiv Ela Torah. What is really good? What is good without any type of explanation and so on? That's Torah. Elam Sha'toiv hu ba'oifen shel oir. The Toiv is in a way of light. By the way, before that, in the in footnote 10, the Rebbe says that Tosim is also from the word Sima ve'oitzer. The Yerushalmi explains that Eila Mishpatim Shetosim Lefneim indicates something that's a Sima, something that's a treasure. Meaning, the Rebbe says, not just the chukim of the Torah is something that permeates the person and becomes part of them because via the assistance of the Mishpatim, but even the secrets of the Torah, even the innermost aspects of the Torah, those parts of the Torah which is tasim from the word sima, which are the treasures of the Torah, the most concealed parts of the Torah, the divine chariot and so on, they become revealed and they are permeated in the entire being of the person. That's what it means tasim lifneihem. Lifneihem also means lipnimiyusam, to their innermost level. That was footnote 10. So back to what we're saying over here. Parshas Yisro, which precedes it, is number 17. That's the good of the Torah. And that's in the manner of oir, because we know that Hashem saw ha'oir kitov, that the light is good. That light is identified with good. But what is light? Light is not like food. Food is something that goes in me and I ingest and it becomes part of me, it becomes my life. Light is something that comes from above to below. It's something that's outside of me. Again, like we said, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. Hainu, this means Gilim al Mile, the revelation from above. V'tzrichim mamshicha lamata behamata. Then this light that comes from above in Parshas Yisro, one needs to draw it down in the things down here below. It should permeate the existence and the being of the person to give him life. Parsha Yudches Chai through the 18th Parsha, the level of life. These are the mishpatim that you will place before them, like we said before, like a set table that is ready for a person to eat. And so you remember we mentioned before that Torah, that Shulchan Aruch is called Shulchan Aruch because it is. And to note, that this matter is hinted also in the Sefer that sets and down the laws of what we're supposed to do. It's called Shulchan Aruch. And in Shulchan Aruch itself, the first of the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch, Rishon Gamba Mailav Chashivas. The Chassidus always emphasizes if something is first in order, that also indicates that it's first in level and first in importance. So the first part of Shulchan Aruch, what is it? Nikra b'shem Orach Chaim. It's called the path of life. Kishmoi Keinu, meaning that what its name is implying, that's what it is. That the Shulchan Aruch, top of the second column, Nasa Orach Chaim, it becomes the path of life. Derech v'seider chayav shel Yehudi b'chaya yom yom. It is the path and it's the order of the life of a Yid in his day-to-day life. Those are the halachas that speak about an Orach Chaim. In other sections of Shulchan Aruch, it speaks about specific situations. Parsha Mishpatim speaks about business laws. Even Ezra speaks about laws having to do with men and women and marriage and so on. The Yeridea speaks about laws having to do specifically with things that are like prohibited things and permitted things and so on, known as Isur v'Heter, etc. But Orach Chaim means it follows the person in his day-to-day life. What do I do from the moment I get up in the morning till when I go to sleep at night? What do I do from the beginning of the year through the end of the year? It goes through all the Yomim Tovim and so on. So it's the life of the Yid. In other words, again, this concept of living Torah, how to be a Jew that lives Torah, is in Orach Chaim, the path of life. So the simple meaning of Orach, we use in the colloquial, Orach is a word for guest, as nachnosas orchim. But the literal meaning of the word Orach means a road, a path. That's why I was translating Orach Chaim, the way of life, the path of life. The reason why a guest is called Orach is because he travels on the road, just like a mezuzah. The literal meaning of the word mezuzah means a doorpost. The scroll that we attach to the doorpost, we call it a mezuzah because of the doorpost that it's attached to. The same thing, the literal meaning of Orach means way, the path of life. Now the Rebbe says, Orach, the Rebbe divides it even more so, that Orach hu orches, it's the light of 8. What does that mean? To draw down the level of light. Like we said before, light is something that's transcendent. Light is coming from up there. Light represents the Parsha number 17, the Or Kitov, the giving of the Torah from above. Or Kitov, Ein Tov Torah, Kfi Shibayfin Shall Give Malmaila, in a way that's a revelation from above. But we don't want just Or alone. But Ba'oifin she is Gala v'Yachder ba'aches Rosh Tevis Chayim. We want it should be Orches. It should come down to be a light that comes down into something, Ches standing for the word Chaim, that the light should permeate the life. Lias Orach Chaim, it should be the path of life, which is Derech v'Seder Chaya Yom Yom, the way and the order of the day-to-day life. Okay, we're going to skip a few pages. In your copies, just going to be the next page. But in the Sicha, we're going to skip from Ois Beis to Ois Vav, page 247. We're going to go over here to Ois Vav, which is in the second column. Another primary thing concerning the lesson, what it means to live with the Torah. Meaning, living with the Torah should tzarich liyos ba'ofen shel simcha. It has to be the way we are connecting with the Torah, the way we live with the Torah, the way Torah becomes completely part of us means that it is done, it's in a manner of joy. Chayus kshura im umevia simcha. Life vitality is connected with and brings joy. When a person is excited about something, he's living it, so then he's happy to do it. If a person's just doing something because he has to do it, it's not his life, it's not what he lives for, it's not what his life is about, he's just doing it because he's got to do it, so then it's not a matter of joy. Something that's his life, he enjoys doing it. Therefore, when a Yid lives with Torah, which is Sinai, permeates his entire being, till it becomes his life and vitality. Therefore, automatically, he studies Torah and fulfills mitzvahs, not in a way that he's being coerced, not because someone else is commanding him to do so. He does it out of vitality and life and joy, because he appreciates that this is our life and this is the length of our days. Like it's hinted also in Shulchan Aruch, the portion of the way of life, like we said before. Like we learned before, that the Torah becomes his way of life. The Torah is his life. The conclusion of it is, let's skip the parentheses. The Ramah, who the Rebbe says in the parentheses, is called the tablecloth that goes on top of the Shulchan Aruch. He is incorporated in the actual text of the Shulchan Aruch. He speaks the last halachas in Shulchan Aruch. You remember I said he goes through the cycle of the year. So he starts, after going through the daily cycle, he starts with the morning to the night. Then he goes through Shabbos. Then he starts going from Pesach to Shavuos and Hilchos Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shmini Atzeres, the Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, Chanukah, Purim. And what's the final conclusion of the halachas? That the Rebbe says we go always after the conclusion. After Purim is something we have this year. Purim Kot, the minor Purim, which we celebrate and mark in the first Adar. And it's discussed over there, literally in the last part of Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, about does one have an obligation to have a special meal on Purim Cotton? So the Ramah concludes, go ahead, go for it. And he says, because in the pasuk it says, Toiv Leiv Mishtatamim, someone that is good of heart is always celebrating, quoting a pasuk from Mishlei. Lelamdach, why does the Orach Chaim conclude that way? Why does the section of Shulchan Aruch that is telling you about the way of life and how we incorporate and make Torah our life conclude with this pasuk to teach you Sha'achayim im HaTorah Orach Chaim, the life with the Torah, which is the path of life, Tzarich liyos mitoch simchat midis, has to be out of a constant and ongoing joy. One has to be permeated with the level of joy. And that's why the conclusion, which sums it all up and says what it's all about is Tov Leiv Mishpatim. The Rebbe brings out that this idea, the Simcha connected with the Torah being our life, is also hinted in our Parsha. This idea is also hinted in Parsha Mishpatim. The first place of the Torah that's mentioned any of the mitzvahs having to do with Yomim Tovim. Later on in Parsha Pinchas, it's going to talk about it. In other Parshas, it's going to talk about Yomim Tovim. But the first place where it talks about Yomim Tovim in the Torah from the beginning is Parsha Mishpatim, Shalish Regalim Tachig Libashana. You should celebrate for me 3 pilgrimage festivals, Vahoylach and Mefaret, and then the pasuk goes on and details it as Chag HaMatzos, the Matzah Yom Tov of Pesach, B'Chag HaKotzer Gomer, and the Harvest Yom Tov, which is Shavuos, B'Chag HaOsav. I'm sorry, the not Chag HaKotzer is harvest. The cutting of everything. That's by Shavuos time. Chag HaOsav. That's a time of collecting and harvesting and bringing everything inside. Moyadim l'simcha. All the idea of Yomim Tovim is about they are appointed times, they are celebrations of joy. In the Yom Tovim, there's the command and the mitzvah to be rejoicing in your Yomim Tovim. True, the Rebbe says in the footnote that there's different levels of how a person rejoices, even in these 3 Yom Tovim, but still, there's still a common denominator amongst all of them of being joyous. Yesh loymar, we could say, Shebezen nirmas shagam klolos ha'inyan de mishpatim, sha'atoyra chayderes b'pnimiyusi achenas lachai shaloi tzarech liyis b'ayim shal simcha davke. With this is also hinted the general idea of mishpatim, that the Torah permeates him and becomes internalized, like we said before, lefneihem, and this becomes his life. It becomes his own life, permeating the person. Becoming his life has to be specifically in a way of joyousness. So the Rebbe says in the footnote a very interesting thing. It says at the end of Parshas Yisro, it speaks about the halachas of making a mizbeach. It says that making a stone mizbeach, a person is not supposed to raise upon them a sword. It's not supposed to cut the stones with a sword. And the Rambam brings down, what about the stones that they used to make the harabayis? The harabayis shows on the harabayis was the place where the Beis Hamikdash was housed, the Temple Mount. What do you do with those stones? So those, how do you chop up those stones? You need to have some type of metal instruments. So they used to chop up the stones with metal instruments outside of the area of the harabayis of the Temple Mount, and then bring it in. So the Rebbe explains what is the spiritual significance of that. Chopping something up indicates like a negative thing, like a type of bitterness. It's like that person is suffering from being a stone. He has leiv ha'evan, like the Chazal, like the Torah calls it. He has a heart of stone. So sometimes you need to have the idea of bitterness to remove that heart of stone and to soften it. But that is only mibachutz, the Rebbe says. That's only when it's outside. Because having bitterness, Chassidus explains, even those situations and cases when a person is allowed to be bitter about his negative state, that's only as a preparation for a person's service to Hashem. That's why it cannot be done on the harabayis. The harabayis is the place where you actually serve Hashem. The avoida on the harabayis, the avoida the Beis Hamikdash, you cannot bring a sword over there. You cannot bring an iron over there. You cannot bring metal over there, because the avoida itself, the service itself, the harabayis itself, the Beis Hamikdash itself, the mizbeach itself, has to be specifically in a state of joy. Then the Rebbe goes on to say, back to the second paragraph on page 248, Yesh lahos, if we could add the bir diuk haloshen Yomim Tovim, in explaining the exact language that we're calling the things that we're just now talking about. The Chumash in our Parsha Mishpatim talks about the Shalosh Regalim. We call it Yom Tov. And it's not just that we made it up, but Kefisha Nikra Benuschat Tfilas Hamida Kiddush B'Chsamazon, it's called Yom Tov in Shemoneh Esrei. It's called Yom Tov in Kiddush. It's called Yom Tov in Yalav Yavai and the Harachma that we say. So even though in Torah we have different words for Yom Tovim, we call them Regalim, we call them Moyadim, we call them Mikroi Kodesh, but the Chazal established the word Yom Tov in all these different tefillas. So why is it called Yom Tov, v'lo Yom Simcha? Seemingly, if joy is so crucial, let's call it a day of joy. Or some similar type of language and expression. La Ram is to hint inyan the Tov ein Tov al Torah, the idea of good that we said before, that Tov is only Torah. Ha'or ki Tov, the light which is good. Kifishu ba'ofen shel yom, in such a way that it's day, meaning or v'gilim al ma'ila, the light and day. The Tov is a revelation from above. So it's not just enough to be a Yom Tov. It's not just enough that that's a revelation from above, like we said, which is what Parshas Yisrei stands for, but it has to be Nimshach v'choyder v'nasa Chayus. It's put into Parshas Mishpatim to tell you that it has to be drawn down and permeates and has to become his vitality, her vitality. Chayus akshura im simcha, a life force and vitality. It's connected with joy, meaning because it became part of me. Even a type of joy that permeates also physical matters, like we know concerning Yom Tov, it says Ein simcha al babasar, that simcha, the joy, is only through eating meat. The Chazal referring to Shalmei Simcha, there were special karbanos shlamim that were brought for the joy of Yom Tov. Now he goes on, this same idea that joy needs to permeate our physical world is also at the conclusion of Oira Chaim. Toiv leiv mishta tamid. Again, he says the word toiv. Toiv is the level that comes from above, the level of Oir ki toiv. Shemekiven sha Oir ki toiv the Torah nimshach v'chayder v'nasa ba'ifin shel Oir ches rosh tevis chaim. Since the light of the goodness of Torah is drawn down and permeates and becomes in a way of the light of Ches, meaning it's permeating the level of Chaim. The Ches is the Rosh Tevis for word Chaim. Hareze ba'oifen the Mishtatamid. So then it's in a way of constant celebration and a constant way of partying. Chayus hakshura im simcha. That literally he lives a life that's connected with joy. We're talking about a joy that permeates also his physical matters. It's a party in a simple sense, that a physical party is a physical manifestation of joy. So we have Toiv Leiv Mishta Tamid, from the goodness of above, the revelation of above. It has to permeate us into our physical world to have a physical simcha down here with physical enjoyment, with the physical pleasure of this world. Now it's Gishmak, the association of the lesson to live with Torah and Parsha Mishpatim to the time of the year that we read this Parsha in the Torah. And what did we say at the beginning of the Sicha? That Alter Rebbe said we have to live with the times. So in other words, we simply explain living with the times means the Torah portion, but it also has to do with the time in the calendar. Shabbos mevarchim chodesh Adar. This Shabbos, which we are giving the bracha to the month of Adar. The content and the idea of the month of Adar is the month that was transformed for joy, like it says in Megillah Esther. The whole entire month is the concept of joy. Simchas Purim Katan. It's the joy of Purim. In our month, it's going to be the minor Purim. Simcha Shalamaylam Didavak. The Simcha of Purim is a joy that's beyond measure and boundary. Lamaylam is Simchas Kolamoidim. Beyond the joy of all the Yomim Tovim. Shechayderes Binyanim Gashmim, that it permeates physical matters. So the Rebbe brings in footnote 49 a very interesting point. He says, we know the famous idea, it says that Yom Kippur is only Kippurim. It's only like Purim. Why? Because as great as we are accomplishing on the day of Yom Kippur, which is Achas Bashana, has to do with the Yechida, the ultimate highest level of the person's nefesh. What we accomplish on Yom Kippur with fasting, on Purim we accomplish specifically through Mishta v'Simcha, through joy and partying. So again, we see this idea of why Purim is even higher than Yom Kippur, because it permeates it permeates their physical things. So too, what it says at the conclusion of the Sefer Orach Chaim, that it's a good of heart is always in a state of mishta. Like I mentioned before, this is explained at the end of the laws of Megillah and Purim. In other words, like we said, the Shulchan Aruch goes via the cycle of the year. So it starts off with Pesach, which is Nisan, the first month of the year, and goes all the way around. And the last halachas after Hanukkah is the halachas of Purim. And after the halachas of Purim, it speaks about the minor Purim, Purim Katan. At the conclusion of that, it says, and specifically, it concludes B'dinei Purim Katan, with the halachas of the minor Purim, which is Yudalad Tesva of Adar Rishon, which is the 14th and the 15th of the first Adar, which is Shashayach B'Yoser B'Shana Zush Nasa Ibur, which has a very strong and even more so connection this year, because this year is a leap year. The connection of this lesson to a time of joy, in other words, the fact that we read Parsha Mishpatim, that's about the idea of Chayus in Torah. It's about the idea of, because we have Chayus, we have to be, this causes us joy. It has to do with the time of the year of joy. This emphasizes even more so that the life of Torah has to be out of joy specifically, until joy of physical matters in the literal sense. Just like the vitality with Torah permeates also in physical life, in the literal sense, that is expressed in the joy that we are concluding in this time of the year. Okay, that's it for today.
Well, thank you.